Democrats must recognize that Zohran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. Get it? But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the '24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Bill Maher is once again going after his own party, and this time his target is New York's new mayor, Zohran Mamdani. Hailed by the DNC as their latest rising star, Mamdani has quickly become a liberal favorite, but Maher isn't buying the hype. His take on Zohran's future in the party is blunt, brutal, and impossible to ignore. So hit subscribe and let's break it down.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center.
According to Maher, the Democratic Party now looks like a house split clean down the middle. On one side, there's a growing faction that openly flirts with socialism, believing the party should fully embrace the label and everything that comes with it. On the other side are Democrats who won't even touch the word, knowing how toxic it sounds to everyday voters outside elite activist circles. Maher firmly plants himself in this second camp. He argues that socialism may sound trendy at rallies and on college campuses, but it becomes electoral poison the moment it reaches working-class voters in swing districts. Maher warns that history, both in the United States and abroad, shows that socialist branding scares off moderates, independents, and even loyal Democrats who just want stability and common sense. His message is blunt: if the party keeps chasing ideological purity over practicality, it risks shrinking its own tent and handing victories to Republicans.
Problem is, Gen Z thinks socialism's wired and capitalism's tired and billionaires are what's for dinner. And who can blame them? If you're 30 and still sharing a bathroom with roommates, capitalism isn't working for you. People will reject any economic system where there's strange hair on the soap. No one wants to be approaching middle age and still writing their name on food before they put it in the fridge. So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to Thing is, socialism will because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never worked, like Kevin Federline.
Maher breaks down why socialism continues to attract followers, and in his view, the appeal isn't complicated. He argues that many of the people drawn to it are middle-aged Americans who feel stuck, burned out, or left behind by a system that hasn't delivered on its promises. For them, socialism starts to look like a lifeline, a last-ditch escape route from financial stress, career disappointment, and a sense of personal failure. Maher doesn't mock that frustration, he acknowledges it, but he draws a hard line between empathy and illusion. According to Maher, socialism sells comfort, not solutions. It promises security without addressing human nature, incentives, or the realities of power. His warning is blunt and unapologetic. Socialism has never worked anywhere, at any scale, and there's no reason to believe it suddenly will. Dressing it up with modern slogans doesn't change the outcome. It just delays the disappointment.
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century or any century, a mess.
It's easy to look back at history and assume our ancestors simply got it wrong, and that with modern knowledge, better intentions, and smarter people, we can do the same things differently and finally get it right. Sometimes that's true, but history also has a habit of repeating itself, especially when the underlying ideas remain unchanged. Maher's point is that socialism hasn't evolved in any meaningful way since its inception. The language may be softer, the branding more polished, but the core mechanics are still the same. Centralized control, distorted incentives, and the concentration of power all lead to the same outcomes, and those outcomes rarely bode well for any government that tries to implement it. Maher argues that believing this time will be different isn't optimism, it's denial. Ignoring decades of real-world examples doesn't make the risks disappear, it practically guarantees them. When history keeps flashing warning signs, pretending they don't apply is a dangerous gamble.
It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Maher predicts that if Mamdani steers New York down a socialist path, the city could become the next high-profile victim of failed ideology. In his view, the consequences wouldn't arrive all at once, but they would be painfully familiar. Wages would stagnate as businesses pull back or leave, investment would dry up, and job opportunities would shrink. Basic infrastructure, already strained, would deteriorate further. Unreliable electricity, crumbling roads, and public services that cost more while delivering less. To plug the growing financial holes, taxes would climb higher and higher, pushing middle-class families and small businesses closer to the edge. Maher argues that this isn't fear-mongering. It's a pattern seen repeatedly wherever socialist policies take root. New York, he warns, is already expensive and fragile. Piling ideology on top of dysfunction could turn manageable problems into permanent crises. His message is clear. Once the decline starts, reversing it becomes far harder than stopping it in the first place.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Maher pointed to a textbook example of why socialism repeatedly falls apart, highlighting Bernie Sanders' push for single-payer healthcare as a supposed cure for bureaucratic overload in medicine. The promise sounded simple and seductive. Eliminate private insurers, centralize payments, and magically make healthcare cheaper, faster, and more efficient. But Maher argues that the reality exposed the fantasy. Instead of reducing bureaucracy, single-payer systems often replace many smaller bureaucracies with one massive, slow-moving government machine. Costs didn't disappear, they ballooned. Delays increased, choices narrowed, and efficiency took a back seat to political decision-making. Maher's critique isn't ideological, it's practical. He notes that good intentions don't override economic reality or human behavior. When the government becomes the sole payer, rationing becomes inevitable, innovation slows, and accountability blurs. What was sold as a streamlined solution turned into another cautionary tale. In Maher's view, the experiment didn't just stumble, it confirmed why socialism keeps failing under real-world pressure.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more.
Here, Maher shifts into educator mode, aiming his message at those who may be deluding themselves into thinking socialism is a personal or national savior. He explains that the United States already has elements of socialism woven into its system, whether people realize it or not. From Social Security and Medicare to unemployment benefits and public education, the government has long used social interventions to soften capitalism's harshest and most brutal edges. These policies exist to provide a safety net, not to replace the entire economic system. Maher's point is that acknowledging these programs doesn't mean endorsing full-blown socialism. There's a massive difference between regulating capitalism and abandoning it altogether. He argues that capitalism, while imperfect, remains the engine that drives innovation, growth, and opportunity. Socialism, on the other hand, promises fairness, but often delivers stagnation and control. For Maher, reform is necessary, but revolution is reckless.
They were petrified of COVID, masking 2-year-olds who never would have died from it and keeping schools closed for far too long. They're definitely afraid of their kids, who from time immemorial have always come up with bad ideas. They're kids. Thinking up stupid shit is what they do. But parents used to tell them, that's ridiculous. The world doesn't work that way. Not today's parents. They say, you're right, honey. Gender is just a social construct. Please, sometimes your mother and I forget which one of us has.
Maher takes aim at Democrats for what he sees as a growing culture of fear and hesitation within the party. According to him, they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, offending the wrong group, or confronting bad behavior, even when it comes from their own side. In Maher's view, this fear has become so extreme that they can't even reprimand anyone anymore. Not activists, not colleagues, and not even their own children. Instead of leading, they tiptoe. He argues that this constant anxiety has pushed Democrats into non-stop pandering to the far left, a small but loud faction that demands purity tests and instant outrage. Meanwhile, the party loses sight of what actually matters to everyday voters: safety, stability, affordability, and common sense. Maher warns that leadership requires backbone, not applause from Twitter. If Democrats keep governing from a place of fear, they won't just lose arguments, they'll lose elections.
I mean, I don't know if we're still banning TikTok. That was before we changed the rule in America to Trump decides what's a law. But I know it wouldn't even be an issue if parents would sack up and tell their kids to get off the phone. Democrats are still afraid of the mean girls who police their far-out fringe. Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton had a perfect score on LGBTQ issues from the Human Rights Campaign. But when he said, I have 2 little girls, I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, his own campaign manager quit.
And that's exactly why so many Democrats stay silent when it comes to woke ideology. Maher argues it isn't because they genuinely agree with it, but because they're terrified of the mean girls of social media. One wrong phrase, one honest opinion, and suddenly the online mob is at their doorstep, calling them out, piling on, and demanding apologies. The fear of being labeled, canceled, or endlessly hounded has become a powerful form of control. Instead of speaking plainly, many Democrats choose self-preservation. They nod along, repeat the approved talking points, and hope the spotlight never turns on them. Maher sees this as cowardice disguised as unity. Following the herd may feel safe in the moment, but when that herd is charging in the wrong direction, silence becomes complicity. His warning is clear: fear-driven politics doesn't lead to progress, it leads to collapse.
Imagine that, a congressman merely stands up for the liberal principle, the one we used to call, we do still call Title IX, that women get an equal shot in sports, and now it gets you labeled a Nazi. The reason Gretchen Whitmer looked like a toddler playing peekaboo in the Oval Office is she's afraid of the Liz Bratts of the world and the 12 social justice warriors on the internet and what they might tweet to their 7 followers. Alyssa Slotkin calls her party weak and woke. She's right. People vote on instinct. They can smell fear a swing state away, and they'd rather have strong and wrong
Bill Maher's critique of the Democratic Party is as sharp as it is unflinching. He sees a party divided, torn between those flirting with socialism and those who know better, between ideological purity and practical governance. Maher warns that socialism, despite its appeal to the frustrated and disillusioned, has never worked and never will. It promises escape and fairness, yet history and real-world experience show it brings stagnation, control, and disappointment. Even the elements of socialism that exist in America, Social Security, Medicare, unemployment benefits, are safety nets within capitalism, not replacements for it. Beyond ideology, Maher calls out the Democrats' culture of fear, afraid of offending, afraid of social media mobs, and afraid to reprimand even their own. They've become a party that panders to a vocal fringe while ignoring the needs of everyday voters. Following the herd may feel safe, but it leads straight into irrelevance. Maher's message is clear. Without courage, pragmatism, and a respect for history, the party risks losing not just elections, but its own identity. And this brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.